It was the kind of silence that made my skin crawl. I never thought silence could be so loud, but here it was, deafening, echoing around our house like a constant reminder of what was slipping through my fingers. His absence wasn't physical. No, he was still right there beside me, just not there. How did it all begin? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, but one day I woke up and realized he wasn't looking at me the way he used to. His eyes, once full of warmth, now glanced over me like I was a piece of furniture in the background of his world. His words, once affectionate, now faded to terse comments that left me wondering if he even remembered the woman he married. At first I told myself it was just a phase. Maybe work was stressful, or he was dealing with something he didn't want to talk about. I made excuses for him, anything to explain away the coldness that seemed to wrap around him like a thick, suffocating blanket. But as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't ignore it any longer. The man I had given my life to was slowly drifting away from me, and no amount of pretending or hoping was going to change that. It started subtly. Small things I used to love, his playful touches when he passed by, the way he would sneak up behind me to whisper something funny, disappeared. In their place, a vacuum, a void. He was there physically, but emotionally, he was miles away. The once charming texts, the spontaneous calls to check in during the day, the silly inside jokes we shared, they were gone. It was like I had been erased from his life, and I was the only one who hadn't noticed it yet. He would come home, eat dinner in silence, and retreat to the couch, his eyes glued to his phone or the TV screen. I tried to talk to him, tried to find a way back to us. "Is everything okay?" I'd ask, my voice trembling with uncertainty. But he would just shrug, barely looking up from whatever was distracting him. "Yeah, I'm fine, fine." The words stung like acid. I wasn't fine. I hadn't been fine for weeks. But I swallowed it down. I couldn't lose him, not without a fight. But I was losing him, and I knew it. I started watching him closely, the way he barely noticed when I wore the new dress I had bought for our anniversary, the way he never commented on the dinner I spent hours preparing, the way he never seemed to hear me when I talked about my day. It was all like he was trying to disappear, and I was the one left in the wake of his absence. I had become invisible to him, and I didn't know how much longer I could take it. One night, I sat on the edge of our bed, looking at him as he stared blankly at his phone. He didn't even hear me when I softly whispered his name. "David," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" He didn't even blink. His thumb continued scrolling as though I wasn't even there. That was the moment. I had had enough. The man who once promised me the world had vanished into thin air, and I was just supposed to sit here, pretending nothing was wrong? Pretending everything was fine? No, not anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. How could I? My mind was racing, filled with 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 emotions, none of them good. Every moment I'd spent pretending everything was fine felt like a lie. And now, in the middle of the night, with nothing but the ticking of the clock to keep me company, I realized I couldn't keep lying to myself any longer. I watched him. His chest rose and fell steadily as he slept, oblivious to the storm that was brewing inside me. In the dim glow of the moonlight, I saw the face of the man I had once fallen in love with. But beneath the surface, I could see the cracks, the distance, the indifference. I had tried everything to keep us together, to bring him back, but it was like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. The next morning, I woke up determined. I wasn't going to wait around any longer for him to notice me, for him to come back. If he wasn't going to fight for us, then I would. I walked into the kitchen, where he was already sitting at the table, sipping his coffee, his eyes glued to the newspaper. The air was thick with unspoken words, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook anymore. Not today. I took a deep breath, standing tall, my hands clenched at my sides. "David," I said, my voice calm but firm. "We need to talk." He barely looked up from his paper. "What about?" His casual dismissal cut me deeper than I expected. I fought the urge to break down right there. Instead, I forced myself to meet his eyes. About us, I said, feeling the weight of those two words settle between us. About the fact that you've been ignoring me for weeks. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something like surprise, but it was gone so quickly I almost wondered if I had imagined it. He sighed, setting the paper down slowly, and looked at me with a tired expression. I'm just busy, okay? Work's been a lot lately. His words felt like an insult, a slap to the face. Was he seriously trying to blame work for this? It's not just work, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's everything. You don't talk to me. You don't look at me. You don't even care. His jaw tightened. I care. I shook my head. No, you don't. You stopped caring a long time ago, and I've been pretending not to notice. But I'm done pretending, David. I'm done being ignored. I deserve more than this. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't need this right now, okay? I'm doing the best I can. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I stepped closer to him, my voice rising with the emotion I had kept buried for so long. The best you can? Is that really all you have to say? You've been shutting me out, pushing me away, and now you expect me to just keep quiet about it? You're acting like I don't exist, and I won't take it anymore. The anger in his eyes was unmistakable, but so was the confusion. He didn't know what to say, and that was the problem. He had stopped seeing me, stopped listening, stopped even trying. For a moment we just stood there, staring at each other, the silence heavy and thick between us. And then, as though something finally snapped inside me, I said the words I had been holding back for weeks. I'm done, David. I'm done being invisible. I'm done being ignored. And I'm done with you. His face hardened, and for a brief second I thought he might say something, do something, anything. But he didn't. He just turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of what I had just said crashing over me. I had crossed a line. I had said what I needed to say, but it felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. Was this it? Was this the end of us? But in that moment, something strange happened. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel the crushing weight of fear or sorrow that I expected. Instead, I felt relief. I had finally spoken my truth, and I knew I couldn't take it back. But I also knew that something inside me had changed. I wasn't the woman who had quietly endured the silence anymore. I was the woman who had had enough. The days that followed were like walking through a fog. Every moment felt suspended in time, as though I was living in some kind of twisted dream where nothing made sense, and everything was a blur of confusion. David didn't return home that night. He didn't even call. The silence between us now felt like a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. I spent the entire evening pacing, trying to convince myself that it was just a fight, that it wasn't the end, that he'd come back and everything would go back to normal. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Not anymore. The next day, I woke up to an empty house. His side of the bed was cold, untouched, and I could still feel the weight of his absence pressing against me. It had only been a few hours since the confrontation, but it already felt like a lifetime. I tried to distract myself, doing the laundry, tidying up the house, anything to fill the void. But the silence followed me, a constant reminder of the tension that had built up over weeks, months even, and now it was impossible to ignore. As the day wore on, I began to wonder if this was how it was going to be now. Was this the end of us? Was this how our story would be remembered? Not with a bang, but with the quiet, relentless drip of disappointment. Around noon, I got a text from him. It was short. Too short. I'm staying at Mark's. Don't wait up. I stared at the screen for a long time. His words stung, but they also gave me a strange sense of clarity. Mark was one of his old friends, a guy I'd met a few times, but I knew better than to try and reach out to him. David had made his decision, and I wasn't part of it. I wanted to cry, to scream, to throw something at the wall, and let all my pent-up rage spill out. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there in the silence, holding my phone like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. I didn't hear from him again that day, or the next. And as the hours stretched into days, something inside me began to change. It wasn't just the anger anymore. It was something else, something I hadn't expected. Strength. I'd spent so much of my life letting him dictate how I felt, how I should act, how I should love. But now, I saw it all clearly. He had left me to fend for myself, to deal with the weight of our broken relationship alone, and for a long time, I had let him. But no more. The woman who had been sitting in that kitchen, desperately trying to get his attention, was gone. And in her place was someone new, someone who was finally learning to put herself first. It felt liberating and terrifying all at once. But the fear no longer had control over me. On the third day, I got a call from his phone. For a split second, my heart jumped, hoping it was him, hoping he was finally coming back to talk. But it wasn't David. "Hey, it's Mark," his voice came through the phone, sounding oddly chipper. "David's been talking a lot and, well, he's kind of messed up. I think you should know that." I felt a twinge of unease, but I kept my voice steady. "What are you talking about?" Mark hesitated before continuing. He said something that made me think you needed to know. "He's been seeing someone else, okay? This whole thing with you isn't just about work or stress. There's someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of me. "Who?" I managed to whisper, my voice breaking despite myself. "Doesn't matter," Mark said, his voice soft. "He's been seeing her for a while now. I didn't know how to tell you, but you deserve to know." I hung up the phone without saying anything more. I didn't need to hear any more. I already knew what it meant. He had found someone else. The man who had been ignoring me, pushing me away, was already moving on, leaving me in the wreckage of a marriage I had tried so desperately to save. The truth hit harder than I expected, and yet, in some strange way, it also felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't me. It was him. And he had made his choice. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, not sure what to do next. My mind was spinning, my heart was shattered, but something inside me said, no more. No more tears, no more begging for a man who had already decided I wasn't enough. And just like that, a decision was made. I wasn't going to beg him to stay. I wasn't going to cry for the love I thought we had. I was going to take back my life. I was going to find myself again, without him, and I was going to be stronger for it. The next few days were the quietest of my life, the kind of silence that feels like a looming storm, just waiting to break. I moved through my daily routine, mechanically, but something inside me had shifted, irreparably. The woman I had been was no longer there, and in her place was someone determined to find her own path, her own worth, without needing anyone to validate it. I went to work, did the things I used to do, but everything felt different. I could feel the absence of David like a hollow echo around me. But oddly, it didn't hurt anymore. It was a strange feeling, freedom wrapped in pain. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from David. I hadn't heard from him in days, not since Mark's call. I stared at the message for a moment, feeling the familiar knot of nerves form in my stomach. I need to talk. I could almost hear his voice in those words. He wasn't begging. He wasn't pleading. He was asking for permission. And it was the first time in weeks that he'd truly acknowledged me. The old me, the one who had tried so hard to keep everything together, might have jumped at the chance to hear him out. But not this time. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and typed back, "What's there to talk about, David? You've already made your choices." The response came quickly. I made a mistake. A part of me wanted to laugh bitterly. A mistake? Was he serious? I wasn't a fool. I had given him years of my life, and he was calling it a mistake. He didn't even have the courage to tell me the truth. But I didn't laugh. I didn't respond with anger or bitterness. I just stared at the screen, feeling something inside me settle. The old wounds, the ones he had caused, were starting to heal, and with them the need to explain myself, to defend myself, was fading. Instead of replying, I set my phone down and walked away. There was nothing left to say. Later that night, I came home to find him standing in the living room, his figure outlined by the dim light coming through the window. The house still felt cold, empty, like it wasn't truly my home anymore. He looked at me with those eyes, the same eyes I had once loved, the same eyes that had once made me feel like I was the only person in the world. But now, all I saw was a stranger standing in front of me, apologizing for things he had no real understanding of. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice hoarse, his hands wringing together as though searching for the right words. "I know I messed up. I know I haven't been the husband you deserved." I couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to hear the words that were meant to sound like an apology, but were just hollow echoes. "You think you can fix this?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart felt like it was slowly breaking again. "You think a few words are going to make it all go away?" He stepped closer, but I took a step back. "Don't," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You don't get to come back like nothing happened. You don't get to hurt me, disappear, and then waltz back in when you feel like it." For a moment, he looked defeated. His shoulders slumped, and I could almost see the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. But I didn't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice barely a whisper. "I love you. I don't want to lose you." But the words didn't hold the same power they once did. The love that he spoke of felt like a distant memory, one I wasn't sure I wanted to return to. My heart had been broken too many times for me to go back to the man who had broken it. "I loved you too," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "But I can't keep pretending that you still see me. You don't, David. You haven't for months. And I'm not going to stay here, waiting for you to wake up." I saw his eyes fill with tears, but I wasn't moved. I had cried enough. "I don't want this to be the end," he said, his voice cracking. "It already is," I replied, the words final, irreversible. "You made your choice when you stopped fighting for us." He looked at me, his face a mixture of regret and disbelief. He didn't understand, didn't get it. And as he stood there, my mind wandered back to everything I had put aside for him, the dreams I had buried, the woman I had silenced. All of it was coming back to life now, and I was no longer afraid to let it take me. I walked past him, my steps slow and deliberate, the weight of the decision pressing down on my chest. But there was also something else, something light. It was the feeling of finally being free. As I reached the door, I turned back to look at him one last time. The man who had once been my everything was now a memory, a chapter in a story that I was ready to close. "I hope you find what you're looking for, David," I said, my voice steady, even as the tears threatened to rise in my eyes. "But it's not here, and it's not with me." And with that, I walked out of the door, leaving him standing in the same spot where I had once stood, waiting for someone to love me back. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was moving forward, and for the first time in so long, I was excited to see what came next. The days after I walked out felt surreal. It was as if I had stepped into a new version of my life, one I hadn't expected but knew was necessary. I had spent so many years of my life giving everything to someone who had stopped seeing me, stopped valuing me. And now, I was finally starting to see myself again, not through his eyes, but through my own. The first few nights without him were quiet, but in the silence, I found space for things I had long neglected. The house, once a constant reminder of our broken marriage, now felt like a place where I could breathe. I would sit in the living room, a cup of tea in my hands, watching the sunset from the window. The peace was unfamiliar, yet comforting. It was as though the world had been waiting for me to step into this moment, and now that I had, it was unfolding in ways I couldn't have imagined. I started to reclaim parts of myself I had forgotten. I began taking long walks in the mornings, something I used to love but had abandoned. I reconnected with friends, the ones I had pushed aside in favor of our life together. They were supportive, not with pity, but with understanding. They didn't ask for details, they just wrapped me in the warmth of their friendship, something I hadn't realized I was missing. One afternoon, a week after I had left, I met up with Rachel, a close friend from work. We sat in a small cafe, sipping our drinks, the conversation flowing easily. "I can't believe you did it," she said, leaning forward with a smile. "I don't think I could have." I laughed softly, the weight of everything I had been carrying beginning to lift. "I didn't think I could either, but here I am." Her eyes softened. "You're so much stronger than you realize." I looked down at my hands, the words sinking in. The truth was, I didn't feel strong at all. I felt scared and uncertain, but at the same time there was a flicker of excitement. I was free. For the first time in years I was in control of my own life, and it felt like the world had opened up to me. "You're going to be okay," Rachel continued, her voice reassuring. "You deserve so much more than what he gave you." Her words settled deep in my chest. I had always known that I deserved better, but hearing it from someone else, someone who truly cared about me, made it feel real. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not as someone's wife, but as me. That night I went home to an empty house. It was quieter than it had ever been, but instead of feeling lonely, I felt calm. I didn't feel the need to rush into anything. I didn't need to find someone new to fill the void. I was learning to be content with myself. The next morning I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman I had become. She was different, stronger, more self-assured. There were scars, but they were no longer raw and bleeding. They were healing, and with each passing day they would fade a little more. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, missing the comfort of what we once had, or, more accurately, what I had believed we had. But the more I allowed myself to feel those emotions, the more I let them go. I was shedding layers of pain I didn't even know I was carrying, and slowly I started to embrace who I was without him. Then, one evening as I was preparing dinner, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a message from David. "I'm sorry for everything, I messed up. Please, can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. A part of me wanted to reach out, to hear his side, to see if there was any possibility of repair. But another part of me, the one that had been growing stronger each day, knew better. He had made his choice. He had already shown me who he was. The man I loved was gone, and in his place was someone who couldn't even see me anymore. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had spent so many years waiting for him to come around, to see the woman I had become, to love me the way I deserved. But the truth was, I had already come around. I had already seen the person I was becoming, and I was finally starting to love her, with or without him. Days passed, and life went on. I began to feel like myself again, like the woman who had dreams, passions, and goals that didn't involve trying to hold a crumbling marriage together. I didn't need him to validate me anymore. I didn't need him to tell me I was enough. I knew it now. And that was more than enough. One evening, about a month after I left, I found myself walking through the park, the sun setting in a burst of oranges and pinks. I had never realized how beautiful the world could be until I took the time to notice it again. I felt the wind on my face, the cool breeze filling my lungs, and I realized something profound. I was okay. More than okay, in fact. I was free. And I was finally ready to live life on my own terms. And if I ever loved again, I would make sure it was for the right reasons. Not because I needed someone to fill the gaps, but because I was already whole. I didn't need him to come back. I didn't need any of it. I had finally found peace, The weeks following that day in the park were a blur of new beginnings. Every day felt like an opportunity to rebuild myself, piece by piece. I had started focusing on what made me happy, what gave me joy without the weight of a failed relationship dragging me down. I reconnected with passions I had left behind, like painting, which I had once loved but hadn't touched in years. The canvas in front of me was bare, just like my life had been when I first walked away from David. And in that space, I felt a profound sense of freedom. The brush in my hand, the strokes of color, they were mine. No one else's. I wasn't painting to please anyone. I wasn't painting to fix anything. I was painting to express myself. And with every stroke, I began to heal. I hadn't heard from David in weeks after that last message. Part of me expected him to come back, to keep pushing, to keep apologizing, but he didn't. And in a way, that was the final closure I needed. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I received a phone call. I saw his name light up on the screen, and my stomach did a strange flip. It had been so long, and I hadn't thought about him in days. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let the past stay where it belonged, behind me. But for some reason, I answered. "Hello?" "Hey." David's voice sounded quieter, almost tentative. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to apologize again. For everything. I don't expect anything from you, I needed you to know how sorry I am. I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me, but they didn't sting like they once would have. They didn't carry the weight of guilt or regret that used to be so familiar. Now they felt distant, like they were coming from someone I didn't even know anymore. "David," I said softly, my voice steady, "I appreciate that. I really do. But I've already forgiven you. I've already moved on. I'm okay." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him exhale, as though he had been holding his breath, waiting for me to say something, anything that would reopen the door he had closed behind him. But I wasn't opening it. "I guess I always thought you'd be there," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. "I took you for granted. And now I see what I lost. I don't know how to fix it." "You can't fix it," I replied, the words coming easier now, as if they had been waiting to be spoken. "What we had is over. It's not about fixing things anymore. It's about moving forward." The finality of those words settled between us like an unspoken truth. He wasn't asking for a second chance. He wasn't begging for me to take him back. He was just acknowledging what he had done. "I get it," he said quietly. "I just want you to know, I never stopped loving you." And in that moment, I realized something that I hadn't before. I had stopped loving him. Not in the way I had once thought. Not in the way Wayne used to ache for him, desperate to make things right. That love had faded, not in anger, but in understanding. I had loved him once, but that person wasn't the man standing in front of me now. And that was okay. "I'll always care about you, David," I said, my voice calm, "but I can't go back. I'm not that person anymore." He was quiet for a long time, and then, as if he had come to the same realization, he simply said, "I understand. I hope you find happiness." "I hope you do too," I replied, and with that, I hung up the phone. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand, processing everything that had just happened. There was no relief, no sense of victory. There was just peace. Finally, I could let go. Finally, I was free of the past. The next morning, I woke up to a soft breeze flowing through the window. It was the first morning in a long time that I woke up without a sense of dread, without the heaviness that had once weighed on me. It felt like the beginning of something new, a chapter of my life I was finally ready to write. I didn't need to rush into anything. I didn't need to find another person to fill the space left by David. I had learned to be whole on my own. I had learned that happiness wasn't about finding the right person. It was about finding the right person within yourself. As I stood by the window looking out at the world outside, I smiled softly. Life was waiting for me. I was ready to embrace it,